All right, so we're online.
Okay, thanks for turning us on. We are waiting for one more board member who I assume will just show up in a couple of minutes as we work through some of the technology. So I'm going to go ahead and call the Tuesday, January 7th, 2021. Happy New Year, everyone. Wilton Board of Education to order. So the first item is to review and approve our agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight?
So moved.
Thanks, Mandy. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Gretchen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda is approved. Comments from the public. Lucille, are you able to do that at this point?
I am able to do that.
Okay.
The first comment is from the Torres Ferreira family. And it says, good day. As concerned parents of a 6th and 8th grader, we urgently request that all Middlebrook kids return to in-school learning as soon as possible. The COVID numbers at the middle school are essentially the same as at the elementary schools. However, the damage that remote learning is causing our 8th grader is worse than the pandemic itself. When you take into account the disengagement from the kids, the lack of consequences for the kids at the school in terms of academic standards, actual grades, not the standardized tests, the lack of socialization, the lack of concern from some of the teachers for their students' learning, and the amount of screen time that the kids are exposed to by not having in-person lessons is more detrimental to our children than the potential exposure to the virus. Our 8th grader has gone from being an A- student to currently being at the point of failing most of his classes. We can only imagine the kids that were struggling with in-person school are faring even worse than our child at this point. By this time, it expected that the Middlebrook administration has been able to learn from the growing pains of Miller, Driscoll, and Cider Mill, as well as from their own in-person sessions. Now that we are almost halfway through the school year, we implore the Board of Education, give the kids a chance to properly learn once again. Thank you for taking the time to consider our request. Sincerely, extremely concerned parents, Torres family. The next letter is from Beth Flavin. This note is short, direct, and to the point. We are in winter, requiring most activities to be kept indoors. COVID numbers are rising daily, both here in Connecticut and across the country. Hospitals are filling/full. This week, both here in Connecticut, across the country, hospitals are filling/full. This week alone, there are 12 cases of COVID in the schools. Hold on, I'm sorry. This is not making sense. This week alone, there are 12 cases of COVID in the schools reported in 4 days, and just today, 2 cases of the new, more contagious strain of COVID were identified in Connecticut. It is irresponsible and reckless to think about bringing the students back to school at full capacity for 4 days a week, especially knowing there is a new strain that is significantly more contagious and will be exacerbated by closer contact and a more robust population. This is not the time. At this point, the hybrid offers partial in-person learning. If in-person learning is the goal, the 4 days will severely backfire by alienating and excluding those who will be forced to give up their hybrid in-person for full remote. It is unacceptable to cater to a small group who will have 4-day in-person at the expense of all other students who will be denied time at school. This conversation should be tabled until the numbers are moving lower, not rising daily, when the weather is warmer and there is more time outside, and when they know the impact of the new, more contagious strain. Thank you, Beth Flavin. And the last letter that I have, the last public comment, is from the WEA letter sent in by Andrew Nixaji. Make it work. This has been the unspoken mantra throughout this school year. Time and time again, teachers and students have done exactly that, made it work. We've made Schoology work, we've made Zoom work, we've made hybrid learning work. Our staff and students have risen to the daily challenges and still found endless opportunities to rise and thrive while doing the impossible, unprecedented, and unknown. There is no way to make the superintendent's plan for a full 4-day return at Middlebrook work in a way that is safe for students and teachers while preserving instructional time. There is no plan for how passing times will be handled. There is no plan for how lunch will be handled. There is no plan for how mask breaks and unstructured times will be handled. There is no plan for how nearly 25 students, some bigger than teachers, can be made to fit into small classrooms with proper social distancing. There is no plan for how hundreds of students will access a common bathroom. A WEA survey conducted today reveals that teachers at Middlebrook are so concerned about this plan for a full 4-day return that 98 out of 102 respondents indicate that Middlebrook is not ready for all students to safely return this month, especially amidst news about increasing COVID cases, continuing deaths, and new variants. The health, safety, and well-being of students and teachers shouldn't be an afterthought in a hastily put together plan. Health, safety, and well-being shouldn't be something we make work on the fly. Respectfully, Andrew Nixaji, Middlebrook teacher and WEA president. And that is it for public comments.
Okay, thank you. I forgot to preface this with my usual statement that the Board of Ed does not respond directly to public comment, although of course we listen and carefully, and we also read any other correspondence that comes our way. The topic tonight that was addressed in public comment is on our agenda. It happens for later tonight to discuss. So thank you. Consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Thanks, Gretchen. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Glenn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's approved. Brings us to reports and recognition. The Board of Education Chair report. I'm making these brief comments on behalf of the whole board. The storming of the U.S. Capitol yesterday has left us shocked and saddened. Given the magnitude of news reporting at the national level and the eloquent remarks by so many of our country's leaders, it may seem strange that our small town local school board is adding to the commentary. But yesterday's appalling events strike at the heart of our democracy, and many of our students were watching. We worry how this will impact them. As parents, we can protect and support our children on personal and individualized levels. As Board of Education members, we can redouble our efforts to ensure they are provided an excellent education. We are reminded that education is fundamental to a free and stable society. Within a school system, we teach our students the rights and responsibilities of citizenship in a democratic society. We will continue to fulfill this vital duty. Thank you. Superintendent report.
Great, thanks, Debbie, and thank you for those comments. I just have a couple of notes for this portion of the meeting. First, I do want to commend our staff today for responding so quickly and handling so beautifully their own response in working with students and helping to process what happened in Washington yesterday, and that'll be an ongoing effort. But many were up late in the night sharing emails and sharing information. Early this morning, there were many resources that were shared across schools, and not surprisingly, our staff rises to the occasion. Also wanted to make the board aware, just before the break, we held a brief meeting with community leaders, and we invited organizations to participate in an effort we're calling Wilton Cares. And so simply described, under a common banner, we're asking organizations in the community to redouble their efforts to check in on folks and remind people that they're not alone during this time of such intense social isolation. We're working to put together a shared events calendar that'll enable organizational leaders to disseminate information and just help their membership better see the different kinds of activities that are taking place across Wilton. We're also working with other organizations to co-sponsor and support efforts to provide resiliency training both for young people and for adults. And really the big picture idea here is that as a community, we capitalize on our strengths, and then we continue to work together to reduce social isolation. So in the coming days and weeks, you can expect to see more and hear more, and you'll see pop up in various places the Wilton Cares banner. So really grateful, Debbie, you were able to participate in that conversation, and we had probably 30 or so people, including First Selectwoman Vanderslice, participate. And so we're just looking to shine some more light here in Wilton and help some folks across the community, including many of our students.
Thanks for getting it off to a good start right before the holidays. Committee reports. I'm not sure any committees have met. I want to say
Ops is not met, so okay.
Teaching and learning did not meet yet. We meet next week.
Policy did not meet.
okay. I'm glad you were all on break instead. All right, that brings us to review and discuss learning model update. Kevin, do you want to take us through that?
Sure will. So, and just to be clear, we're going to, we'll address the Middlebrook portion of this as a later item under the, possible action items. So I'm not going to get into Middlebrook specific details at this moment. So on Monday, as you're all aware, we returned both Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill to full in-person learning. We'll continue to have those models up and running as long as our medical advisor and town health director are supporting that, and both along with me continue to monitor the COVID transmission activity here in Wilton and across the county and the state, and we interact frequently. But right now, that model is in place for Miller Driscoll and Cider Mill and remains. Middlebrook and high school both returned to hybrid this week, and we are currently maintaining the Wednesdays as full remote days. As I noted just a minute ago, I'll be discussing a proposal for Middlebrook later on in this agenda. Dr. O'Donnell and I are meeting tomorrow, and we'll be discussing plans for the high school, and the board can expect an update and recommendations in the next couple of weeks on the high school. We'll also, as an administrative team, revisit and reevaluate the Wednesday remote days. And so likewise, the board can expect some follow-up commentary and recommendations about Wednesdays as we proceed over the next several weeks or month. Our current COVID-19 numbers are as follows. These are report updated every Thursday at about 4 o'clock by the Connecticut Department of Public Health. For Fairfield County, as of today, and remember the data generally lags a couple of weeks, DPH is reporting for Fairfield County 50 average daily new cases with a test positivity rate of 8.2%. That has come up, both the average daily case count and the positivity rate from their last report a week ago. Last week, the average daily case count was 43.8 and the positivity rate was 7.4. And so what we've seen is, in terms of a trend, a steady increase, a decrease over the last several weeks, and now we're starting to see an uptick again. For Wilton, the Connecticut DPH is reporting an average daily case count of 20.2. A week ago, we were at 14.8. Interestingly, a colleague of mine just sent me the average daily case counts across Fairfield County, comparing today and then from 11/19. And at the moment, Wilton has one of the lowest average daily case counts across Fairfield County. So Barry, when he and I were speaking earlier this week, was feeling, pretty good about where we were. So on Monday or Tuesday, he was reporting the most recent data he was looking at. We were averaging about 3 new cases. As the week has progressed here, that number has climbed to about 10. And so we continue to watch both what the state is publishing, and as I said a minute ago, that data tends to lag, and then our really current data. We also look at the COVID Act Now website, and that website also, as you know, reports county by county. It updates multiple times a day. Most recently, when I checked it last, it was reporting an average daily case count of 59.4, and that's up from 56.1 when I was looking at it yesterday. And there too, the trend is the same. We saw a steady climb over the month of November. A pretty substantial, by about 20 or so cases per day decline, and now we're starting to see an uptick again. So we continue to watch that. As you know, also, we track in our schools by students and staff, those who are confirmed COVID positive, as well as those who are quarantining as a result of direct contact. So as of today, we have 1 staff member at the high school and 1 staff member at the district level who are confirmed COVID positive. We have 4 students at the high school, and then 2 each at Middlebrook, Cider Mill, and Millard Driscoll, who are isolating because they're confirmed COVID positive. In terms of staff who are currently quarantining because of direct contact, we have 3 at the high school, 3 at Middlebrook, 4 at Cider Mill, 2 at Millard Driscoll, and 1 at the district level, for a total of 13. With respect to students who are quarantining as a result of direct contact, we have 22 at the high school, 15 at Middlebrook, 11 at Cider Mill, 7 at Millard Driscoll, for a total of 55. And so those numbers, again, as they come in, we continue to collect them and report them daily. In terms of staffing this week, as you know, staffing has been a challenge, and it remains a challenge as we're managing the various, quarantine requirements and illness, people who are out, for other reasons. But we've been able to keep our schools open. And so that's something Maria and her team and the administrators in each of the buildings work on very carefully every day. But so far, so good. And we continue to monitor staffing. I'd also like to provide an update on the various types of COVID testing that we've been talking about over the last month. First, you may recall that the state of Connecticut received these antigen rapid tests, and they were offering them to school districts. The purpose of those tests was, the purpose of the test was to help individuals, whether staff or students, who are experiencing symptoms, identify whether or not they're COVID positive. So in working with Dr. Mackin, she and her colleagues at Doctors Pediatric have agreed to serve as our testing site. So Dr. Mackin shared with me that they've gone through all the steps, they have the test, they're up and ready to go. And we're at a point now where, as we need to, we can start referring to them staff and students who may be experiencing symptoms to get tested, and that'll help speed the process there. So that's really good news, and we're grateful to Dr. Mackin and her colleagues for taking that on for us.
Kevin, is there a cost associated with that testing?
Not for those antigen tests. Those were provided by the state, and there's no cost to us.
Good. Okay, great.
Great. So with respect to PCR testing, so that's the more standard COVID test that we're familiar with. Right now in town, Our Lady of Fatima is sponsoring testing. That testing site is open to anyone who would choose to have a test. Individuals can go on the Our Lady of Fatima website. There's a link right at the top. They can register. Father Reggie told me that the company that they're working with takes insurance. And so in speaking with Maria, we'll be providing that information to our staff, and any staff member who is interested in getting a regular PCR test can avail themselves of that opportunity. Also available to anyone else in the community who would be interested. Yesterday, we shared information with staff. There's another organization in the state that is providing PCR testing. They have a site at various cities around the state. The most local testing site to us is in Norwalk. So we've shared that information with our staff. And, again, it's another opportunity if individuals want to go and take a test. If insurance, for some reason, the insurance doesn't cover the cost of the test for our teachers, the district would assume the cost. And as I've reported before, and we've discussed, we had been exploring this concept of surveillance testing. And so this is a different type of testing. The surveillance model that we were looking at is referred to as pooled testing. And so rather than a PCR test, individuals would go, they'd get a swab, and those swabs are tested as a single sample. And under this construct, if one of the samples within that group is positive, then all of the individuals would have to go and get a follow-up PCR test. We were looking at this for a variety of reasons. One, when you engage in pool testing, you drive down the cost. It's more cost effective. And as we were thinking about other opportunities that we could avail ourselves of just to help keep track of COVID activity here in the community and among our staff, this was one tool that looked like a possibility. As I've explored it, the logistics of setting it up are significant. And as I've engaged with individuals at the Department of Public Health, and then more recently, as I've discussed this with Barry, there seems to be quite a bit of skepticism about the utility and the value of that approach. And in speaking with Barry about that earlier this week, he really was not strongly endorsing it, and wasn't sure that we would really get the return on the investment or the information that we thought would be most helpful in just helping us understand what's happening and with respect to COVID transmission. One of the comments he made was, look, we already know that in-school transmission is relatively low, so really not sure what more you're going to learn if you engage in this type of testing. So I've got a couple more conversations to have. One of our Middlebrook colleagues sent me a note yesterday and said she knows some folks who work at private schools who are participating in this kind of testing. So I'm hoping to have some conversation with them and just get some on the ground information. But in the meantime, what I would recommend to all of our staff members is that if they're interested in participating in testing, we have the option at Fatima, and then we have the other option through the community health program that's running out of Norwalk. And so folks can get tested there. So that's it for that portion of my update.
Can I ask a question about quarantines, length of time, and vaccines for staff? What do we know in terms of timelines or our local health authorities' take on those things?
Yeah, I can handle the vaccine question. I'll ask Maria to take the quarantine question since she is the quarantine queen. So with right now, with respect to the vaccines, it's not yet known. The latest I read was the committee that's involved in making those decisions met yesterday or the day before and didn't finalize decisions about which categories of people or employees would be in that 1B or 1C group. So That remains to be seen. There's also significant worry about the availability of vaccines. And so I think early on there was a thinking that in Connecticut there would be more than there actually is at this moment. And so they've had to reprioritize. So we don't yet have a clear timeline about when we can expect our staff to be eligible to be vaccinated. Marie, do you want to handle the quarantine question?
Sure. So in terms of quarantine, as many people know, the CDC and the Connecticut Department of Public Health issued new guidelines with the potential of shortening quarantine when individuals meet certain criteria. The health director in town wanted to take some time through the month of November to consider the implications of shortened quarantines for some. And he has decided on a number of occasions, because we've revisited the conversation, that he wants to maintain the 14-day quarantine for people who've had exposure to COVID positive individuals. There are a variety of reasons for that. One of the primary reasons is that shortening the quarantine really requires the person who has been exposed to use his or her judgment about whether there are symptoms. It becomes very cumbersome to try to manage who's on the 14, who's on the 10, when the 10-day becomes the 14-day. And so he wanted to really err on the side of caution and maintain the 14-day quarantine. So that is what we've done. We have found, I think, over the past 5 months that we've been in school, that the approach has served us well, generally speaking, to err on the side of caution. And so that's what we're doing at this time. I think, as with anything, things are subject to change. So if the quarantine guidelines change, from his perspective, we'll certainly communicate that to the school community. It's 14 days for people who've had exposure, and it's 10 days for people who are COVID positive. And 10 days is really isolation. So I shouldn't say quarantine. It's really that COVID positive individuals are isolating for 10 days. People who have been exposed are quarantining for 14.
What about, I know we're talking about teachers, but in general, between teachers and students, the people who are traveling over Christmas, does that fall on 10 days or 14 days?
That now is 10 days. That has actually been shortened, and that was just recent. So we are following the Connecticut travel advisory recommendations. So it's been shortened to 10 days. And then there is the potential for people to test out of quarantine, provided that they've had really now it's any type of negative test with the exception of the antibody test. They can have a negative test within 72 hours of leaving the affected state or country or upon return. And as soon as the negative test result comes in and the person has uploaded that result to the state DPH website and also has completed the travel health form, then the person's quarantine may end. So thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any questions on Kevin's points or Maria's points before we move on? Yeah, go ahead.
Quick question. Kevin, our numbers appear to be relatively low. I mean, I think everyone is doing a fantastic job, and I'm not surprised because of the attention we're paying to it. Do we know, comparatively speaking, how our numbers within the school system compare to a New Canaan, a Darien, a Westport, et cetera? Do we share that data back and forth between our system, the districts?
That, some districts like ours post their cumulative totals on their websites. And, I haven't made a really fine study of it, so I couldn't tell you exactly. But as I've been monitoring, each other districts as well as ours over time, my general sense is that our numbers are lower, both in terms of folks who have developed COVID as well as the numbers of folks we've had to quarantine.
Okay. All right, thanks. Okay. I think it would be interesting to know that, to get a better handle on that as we make these decisions going forward.
Any other comments, questions? That's the general overview. We're going to be talking about Middlebrook in particular. Okay, it looks like we're ready to move on then. The next item on the agenda is a policy review and discuss, but it's not ready. The board hasn't received it yet. I think it needs a little bit more work. So can I have a motion to table that item, to table the policy 80 or 60?
3280.
3280, thank you. Is there a motion to table that item?
So moved.
Thanks, Glenn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Ruth. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, we'll see that next meeting. That leads us to our action items. The first of which is to, and again, these are possible action items, is to discuss the learning model specifically at Middlebrook. Kevin, I'm not sure who's addressing that.
Yeah, I'll take that. And then, as we have questions, likely Joy and I can handle questions as they come up. So just to begin, as you all are well aware, earlier this year, when you all adopted goals for the school year, you identified that the determination of which school model to employ will be based on current COVID-19 data from Wilton and the surrounding area, as well as medical advice from our town and state officials. At the time, you identified that you'd also consider input from staff and families, but you'd use the health and medical data as prevailing factors. And that's been our practice from day one. And so as we've discussed at length over many meetings here, I don't show up with recommendations that I've come up on my own in my office and haven't consulted anybody. I spend an awful lot of time, particularly every Tuesday morning, with the State Department of Public Health folks on a weekly webinar. And then I consult very routinely with both Dr. Mack, our medical advisor, and Barry Bogle, our health director. And our practice has been to talk about the environment, talk about trends, talk about both transmission rates outside of the school as well as in school, and then make a proposal and take the recommendations. And I think in every single case, we have adhered to the recommendations. And so the practice as we're getting into the conversation about Middlebrook hasn't changed. We consult our medical and health professionals on everything we do. So I want to start there just so that as a reminder to everybody, we lean heavily on those folks. So the recommendation tonight for Middlebrook School is that we begin returning to a full in-person model starting Monday, January 25th. So we would propose returning grade 6 on Monday, January 25th, grade 7 on Thursday, January 28th, and then the 8th grade on Friday, January 29th. Both Barry Bogle and Dr. Mackin support this proposal with the understanding that first, it's predicated on a stabilization or decline in the average daily case count of COVID-19, at least here in Wilton. As I noted earlier, Barry does watch Wilton's numbers very carefully. And if they continue to worsen, it is possible that he would come back and revise his recommendations. So that is, I can't imagine that's news to anyone on the board. But we've been confronted with that situation before. But it's important to note that this is a proposal subject to change. It's also predicated on the understanding that we don't see a significant rise in in-school transmission. And, as we've discussed, and I've discussed with both Barry and Dr. Mackin, if we begin to see in-school transmission, then we need to look at that, and that too may alter our plan. So that is that's the proposal. And I'll give you just some more, I think, important conversation points. Yesterday, I did speak with the Middlebrook faculty, and I shared with them the proposal. And walking into that conversation, I had proposed to them that we actually consider transitioning beginning the 19th, the Tuesday after after Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And they expressed a lot of concern and worry. And there were some, just general worry about having more kids in the building and increasing the likelihood of transmission. There were some, more specific worries about the building not being ready. And then within that, concerns about, students, just maintaining social distance as students transition between classes. There were concerns expressed about the management of the lunch waves and trying to ensure, safety protocols while kids are having their masks off and eating lunch. Questions about, how to manage students if we increase the density in the building on inclement weather days when they can't go outside. So all, reasonable concerns. They also asked, as we were engaged in that conversation, they were very interested in having either or both Barry Bogle or Dr. Mackin visit the school and make some observations and, hear some of these concerns and just weigh in. And I think, they're just looking for some additional assurances. So I've confirmed appointments with both Barry and Dr. Mackin. So Barry and I will meet at Middlebrook this coming Tuesday. I think we're scheduled for 10:30. So we'll be able to observe a lunch wave. He can kind of get a sense of, what's happening in the building. Jory was going to work to invite a couple of staff members to participate so we can, really just explore some of the questions that were posed and get some feedback from him and make sure that we are covering our bases and making sure that we're taking as many precautions as we can and really using our mitigation strategies to their full power. So that'll be Tuesday. The following Thursday, Dr. Mackin has rearranged her schedule, and so she'll be able to make a visit to the school, I believe, beginning at noon. And so we'll be able to repeat that exercise and, be able to look at some things through her eyes. So that'll be important just in terms of gathering more information, and we'll see, what comes out of that. But I think that'll be helpful, as we listen to, what the staff are expressing their worries over and, hopefully help us manage them a little more effectively. I think in, also considering this proposal, there are other factors that we also have to name here. One of the obvious ones is the fact that there is this new strain of COVID-19. It was, I think, reported just today by Governor Lamont that there are now 2 cases here in Connecticut. And so, what does it actually mean for us? That was addressed earlier this week on the call with the officials from the State Department of Public Health. And, at this point in time, what they're saying is, they're monitoring it and they're, looking to gather more information. And we should all continue to really utilize the mitigation strategies that we have in place because they have demonstrated very clearly to be effective in schools. And so that would be, our plan at this time, but we'll be looking for additional information from that group as they learn and we learn more about this new strain. I think, the other, kind of connecting back to Glenn's question about just, comparisons across schools and districts in terms of numbers of individuals either contracting COVID-19 or having to quarantine. I think we ought to also just factor in that when we do return more students to the building, we do increase the likelihood that more individuals would need to quarantine when there's an exposure. The most significant change here for us when we're bringing more students back to a building is we reduce the minimum amount of social distance space that we can maintain between student workstations. And so like we did at Miller Driscoll, like we did at Cider Mill, when we bring more kids back, we reduce that social distance space from 6 feet to about 3 feet. And, we've set up workstations with sneeze guards. We've ordered additional desks for the school. So students will have enough desks in all the classrooms to manage that. But we also know at 3 feet when there's an exposure, like we've seen in Cider Mill and Miller Driscoll, an entire class winds up quarantining. And so the impact there is we could see more people having to quarantine for 14 days. I think.
Can I just clarify that all the Middlebrook will also have the same sneeze guards that Cider Mill and Miller Driscoll have, right?
Yeah, the building will be set up the same way. So that's right.
There'll be separations, even though they're only 3 feet apart, there'll be separations between the children.
They'll have sneeze guards on each individual desk. That's correct.
Thanks.
I think, again, just in weighing out all of this, we recognize and we continue to monitor the COVID activity. We've made the transition with our 2 younger schools. And so there are lessons that we can and we have learned about those schools. I would say those schools made the transition successfully. As I've been talking to my counterparts in Darien and New Canaan, both of those communities transitioned their middle schools back to full in person some time ago. And they too report that the transitions there were also successful. And so we do have experience and wisdom that we can tap into as we continue to refine our plans and anticipate bringing more students back. A couple of just final points here. Jory is preparing another family survey to get a sense of perspective from our Middlebrook families. When we last surveyed, we learned that many, did indeed desire a return to in-person learning, but we also heard very clearly that the survey didn't enable an opportunity for those who preferred to stay in hybrid to say so. So this next survey will certainly correct for that. As we're planning, we do know that there are families who would prefer the hybrid. We've heard from some of them this week. I don't see, and I want to just be, kind of as clear and upfront about this as I can. I don't see at this point, and as we, continue to work plans, maybe the Middlebrook administration can come up with a way to make this work. I just, I don't see the possibility that we're going to be able to run 3 models simultaneously. We weren't able to do that at Sarah Mill. We weren't able to do that at Miller Driscoll. I don't see that we're going to be able to do that at Middlebrook. We've been talking about it, exploring it, and we'll continue to do so. But just in terms of managing expectations, if we bring students back to full 4 days in person, I'm anticipating parents will have to choose between 4 days in or fully remote. So, we can expect that will be a disappointment for a number of families. And I guess, just the last piece to round out the conversation, we talk about the why. Why are we anticipating making this change? Why now? And I think, as has become, increasingly evident, we know that most students, certainly not all, but most students do better with the structure of full in-person learning. And we've heard that from them. We've heard that from families. We've heard that from staff as well. I think we're also hearing more and more about the seriously negative impact that the social isolation is having on students socially and emotionally. And we need to address that as well. And so providing the structure of full in-person gives us an opportunity to do that. It also provides the in-person structure and the educational continuity that we've seen benefit some of our younger kids. I think the last piece that I would add at this point is, in just thinking about how all of these pieces come together, these are always hard choices. And as we consider health and safety, although we are seeing, we have, over the last 2 months experienced a rise in COVID cases across the region, we haven't seen the in-school transmission. There was, I think, we had maybe one example back in November where we thought it might have been in school at Miller Driscoll, but not positive. And we have had no other indications that we've had in-school transmission that I'm aware of yet. And so that's a major question mark, but I think it speaks to the power of the mitigation strategies that we've been able to employ so far. But it is a significant factor. It's one that Dr. Mackin asks about all the time. And so it's one that we would continue to pay very close attention to. And certainly if we started to see evidence of in-school transmission, we'd have to, reevaluate models. So I'll stop there, and I'm happy to take some questions, some comments.
Can I just ask a question about the survey?
Sure.
Jory, are you guys going to ask 2 separate questions? One question would be, if your options are fully in-person or fully remote, what would you pick? And a separate question would be, what do you prefer, fully in-person, hybrid, or remote?
Yes, that's being teased out. It's
Okay.
being asked. It's actually about 5 or 6 questions, but yeah,
Okay.
that'll tease out. Folks will be able to express their desire.
Okay.
And also by request, a section at the bottom where there's just an open comment.
Right.
So if they want to, if they don't feel like the questions, the way they're worded, speak to their particular needs, there'll be an opportunity at the end of it just to comment.
Okay.
And Jory, I have a question about the survey as well. Are you going to make it per family or per class for those of us who have 2 children in Middlebrook, just so you don't skew the classes? I know I always do surveys based on my oldest, and I feel like that class might get skewed.
The directions will ask you to fill it out twice, actually.
Okay.
Kevin, this is really difficult. It's a hard decision to make. And reading all the letters that we've received over the last few days from parents, clearly they're pushing to come get their kids back in school, and I understand that. My concern, however, is Andrew's letter. Greatly. Clearly, the teachers aren't ready. They don't want it. And if we don't approach this with everybody on the team on board and with a positive attitude, a can-do attitude, we're doomed. And his letter causes me great anxiety. I mean, they're clearly the teachers and he, in whatever direction he's giving them or getting from them, don't want it. And how are we going to address that? Because if the team isn't supportive, if the team isn't in favor, if the team doesn't feel that we've done the right things or are doing the right things, then we're doomed on this process. And that causes me great concern because clearly they're not. And I don't know how we I don't know how we deal with that. I'm greatly concerned about that because if the attitude is we shouldn't be doing this, we shouldn't do it, we don't want to do it, et cetera, it's just not going to work. And I don't know how we get those guys, get our teachers supported, because if they're not, I'm greatly concerned.
Yeah, if you're looking for 100% support, then
no,
we're not going to get it.
So we're not going to get 100%.
Yeah.
Really, his letter was very harsh. It was unbelievable. I was shocked.
Can I step in and say, is it that only the teachers of Middlebrook that responded? Because there was only 104, I think 98 people who responded. So that survey was specific to Middlebrook. And I think, here's what I would say, first and foremost, and, some of the teachers said this to me yesterday, I guess it was yesterday when we spoke, is that, they don't believe that, we're hearing their voice or, we're supporting them. And they're absolutely concerned about the spread of the virus. And I am 100% sympathetic to that. And I think what I've tried to do and what I've tried to do all along, because if you rewind the clock some months here, we had very similar heartrending conversations when we were contemplating the Miller-Driscoll model as well as the Cider-Mill model. And so, I think the best that I can do is to, meet them openly, to hear what their concerns are, to try to respond as meaningfully as possible. And, I would tell you today, if you ask them, you would probably hear a range of responses in terms of, how well we have or have not done that. So I think suffice it to say is, they are concerned and, we do want to hear them. We also need to be very clear about, why we would be even moving in this direction. And, to me, I think we've done, and our teachers have done, and as Andrew wrote in his letter, our kids have done a remarkable job of responding to this environment. And they continue to need to do that because it is so fluid. But we also have a mission, and our mission is to provide the best possible education and support to these kids that we can. And many of them are suffering, and we hear it, we see it in letters, we hear it anecdotally from our school counselors and from parents. And so I think, the question of safety, this is where we have to rely on our medical professionals and on the best advice that, we can get, and we have to try to implement it. And then we monitor and we adjust. And I think that's, how we've approached things in our 2 other schools.
And, I would say, just as a pattern, teachers in those two schools, also expressed a lot of the, very similar kinds of concerns. And the administrators in the building kind of worked with them, and I give Kathy and Jen the floor here if they like it. But it seems to me, from my vantage point, that they're managing it well, and I think they're happy to be able to have their kids back in person. I think they would say it's more effective.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all with anything you said, Kevin. I understand clearly, and there's no doubt that it's the right thing to do if we can get our kids back. Okay? They need it. They need to be back in school. I'm just concerned about the attitude of the teachers at Middlebrook. They clearly are not happy with this, and if they're not supportive, we're going to have a hard road. And they clearly are not supportive. You read Andrew's letter; they don't think we're doing the right thing at all, and that bothers me. It really does. But enough said.
Hey, Kathy and Jen, do you guys have any advice for our middle school teachers that might be helpful?
I do think that when Dr. Mackin, she came to one of our faculty meetings and answered all of their questions, I do think that was incredibly helpful. And just sort of, it was early on, but it was a lot about how, COVID is transmitted, and, some facts about that again, hearing that from a medical professional, I think, made people feel a little bit better. But I have to say, there's a part of it that, you're not necessarily going to feel better until the kids get there. And then you kind of go, okay, I see this happening. And, even today, our leadership team today reviewed a document where we asked, all the different kind of groups, whether it was a grade level or special ed or specialists, for feedback at the beginning of the year. It was a reflection document. And we went back and revisited again, today, and said, okay, where are we and what have we kind of tackled and what do we still need to look at? And overwhelmingly, people were impressed by the students, by, how well they wear their masks, how well they, respect social distancing and mitigation strategy. And these are little tiny kids, and, how much they love being in school. So I think for us anyway, with the little ones, that far outweighs, the challenges that they had around, remote learning. So that's what I can tell you. And I know Jen's not here tonight, so, but I think she would probably say similar things.
Okay, thank you.
And Catherine, I understand that, and I appreciate that. I'm just concerned about, for some reason, Middlebrook seems to be an outlier. We know we need to get the kids back in school. There's no doubt about that. They're struggling and they're suffering. We hear it from their parents. I think the survey that Jory's going to do will be very enlightening in terms of what did the parents want and what did they expect. And I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised that they want their kids back in school. It's the teachers there that concern me and their attitude.
Well, yeah. I don't want to speak for Jory's teachers. I'm sure Jory's teachers also want the kids back in school, but people are scared. People are scared. So, but again, the Dr. Mackin conversation, I think was incredibly helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
I love that Dr. Mackin and Barry are going, because I think we all know how cautious, they both are, and to follow the science and the data. The one thing I will say, Glenn, is look, it's a very scary time no matter what you do. But watching the anxiety, today, cohort B, 20 days since they've entered the school today. So
we've got to get them back. There's no doubt. We
the
have
fear and the anxiety. And I just think at some point, pick your poison. And I hate to say that, but the anxiety, the depression, the fear, it's scary times for everyone.
I don't disagree, Mandy. You're absolutely right. We need to get them back. And I'm just raising the concern. Andrew's letter.
No, I agree. Kevin, I had a question about something I had heard about the teachers, and I don't even know, this might be putting the cart before the horse, and if it is, just tell me. Is it a possibility for them to do the in-school? Who knows how many kids, I think the survey is going to be great. Who knows how many kids are actually going to choose to come back into school if given that choice. But will the teachers be teaching and then have one class that is remote? Or will every class be, have you guys, and again, this is, I'm just happy we're talking about it.
Yeah. You know, at this point, and that's a good question. And one of the teachers asked that question yesterday. And, you know, that was a model that we'd looked at earlier in the year, and we just didn't find a way to make it workable. And as we, you know, we didn't have a prolonged discussion about it. You know, I actually have plans to revisit next week with a group of Middlebrook faculty, and I suspect it'll come up again. What I'm anticipating, Mandy, is that, you know, the model will look, you know, very much like it does at Cider Mill today. So you'll have, you know, more students in person, and then every teacher will be responsible for, you know, some handful of students who are, you know, continuing to participate in the remote experience. I think one of the, if we look to mess with that and try to accommodate creating these, you know, kind of standalone remote classes, I'm worried about just all of the cascade effect that could have in terms of disrupting classes, disrupting student schedules. You know, again, not sure, you know, the way, you know, the schedule at Middlebrook is really complex for a variety of reasons, including the way that we layer in special services support. And so there are lots of considerations. If Damien was on, he could, you know, take you down a 2-hour lecture on all the ways the schedule is complex. But, you know, I think, you know, in this case, simple is best. And I also want to be very clear, because I don't want, you know, we always have lots of our teachers participating and listening to these calls. And so I think I don't want anyone to misunderstand, you know, what's being said, or, you know, what the concerns are. Our staff has risen to the occasion. They continue to rise to the occasion. As Kathy noted, you know, they are afraid, and, you know, that's real, and they're not alone. You know, they're not outliers by any stretch of the imagination. There was a call recently by the state union organization recommending that all schools, you know, remain in full remote learning for some duration. And so I don't want to minimize that concern, and nor do I want to, you know, single that staff out. You know, their concerns, they are doing the very best they can. They absolutely want their kids in person, but they also want to feel safe. And so, you know, to the extent that we can help create an environment, you know, where we're really using all of the mitigation strategies. But, you know, with COVID-19, there is no such thing as 100% safe. And we said that at the very outset back at the start of the school year, and we say it again, you know, until the vaccines are ubiquitous, or, you know, COVID-19 is gone or whatever, you know, we're never going to be 100% safe. And so that's why we have to do the best we can, focus on our priorities, and maximize the use of our mitigation strategies.
No, and I think that, you know, obviously the staff is number one, and we don't want people to go to an environment that they don't feel safe in. Have you talked to, I know, speaking to friends in New Canaan, they've been back full time in the middle school since October 5th. What is the superintendent there saying about, have they seen increasing cases? And I know it's not quite apples to apples, but it is grades 5 through 8. I'm just curious what the feedback you're getting from our surrounding schools that are back in town, Greenwich.
Yeah. Again, you know, I would say, you know, I talk pretty regularly to Brian Lutzey in New Canaan and Alan Adley in Darien. You know, both districts moved their middle school and their high schools back in October. And, you know, from their perspectives, they were very encouraged by that move. And I think, you know, the pattern they described is the pattern we've seen here too. There's a lot of worry and concern. And then, you know, when students are, you know, back in the schools, you know, some of that worry subsides. And so, and I think, you know, someone noted it here, and I heard one of our parents say it earlier today, our kids too really do rise to the occasion. And I think this is a conversation point, as, you know, I know many of our middle school students already are aware of this. You know, they too have an obligation here, we all do, to reinforce the mitigation strategies, social distancing and mask wearing and hand washing and the like. And so, you know, they reported, you know, that very positive outcomes as a result of having kids back in school. I do think, as I've tracked, you know, their numbers, and again, as I said before, it's not scientific,
Right.
but you know, because they have their buildings are more densely populated.
Right.
They've had, you know, greater numbers of folks quarantining. And that's the trade-off when we're making these plans and moving ahead.
And then one last question. Have you seen, I've heard a lot about this, and I'm just curious if you guys are tracking this. I feel like a lot of kids are just not even going to school anymore because they're just choosing to stay home. Have we seen in-person attendance at Middlebrook on the decline?
Certainly, I think tracking the why is a different question, but coming in through December and the holiday period, we've seen an increase in remote attendance and a decline in in-person attendance. And it's variable across team class, but we've certainly, I think, Jory can speak more specifically. I think the numbers at Middlebrook over the last month had moved from, and Jory, correct me if I'm wrong, somewhere in the, mid to low 100s to the somewhere around 200 plus. And I think the high school would say the same. Cider Mill would certainly say the same.
Have beyond Dr. Mackin's visit and Dr. Bogle's visit, have there been any requests made for additional resources or any other types of services or accommodations by the staff in order to facilitate the move? Or is there a way that we can definitely solicit maybe some other types of exercises that may help, decrease some of the concern and worry and fear?
Yeah, certainly, I think those are conversations that are ongoing, more locally, probably between the building administrators and, various staff members. I'm not sure what else. I mean, we certainly asked the question, but in terms of the approach that we've taken and the strategies we've adopted so far, these are the recommended strategies from state epidemiologists, and they've been pretty consistently implemented across school districts. And I think there's some instances where I think we've done a little bit more than others, but I'm certainly open to the concept. I'm not sure what we'd hear back necessarily. And I think generally speaking, when people are afraid of catching the virus and the virus spreads, then I'm just not sure what other strategies we could avail ourselves of.
Well, I think, on the positive side, we have more than 2 weeks to get ready, and more than 2 weeks to try and address the issues that have been raised, and to educate and explain or put an effort forth to get the teachers on board, to get them supported, to get them, to understand why we're doing it, what we're doing, how we're going to do it, the benefits of doing it. We've got 2 weeks before your plan of bringing the students back on the 25th. And I think it should be an all hands on deck to make sure that happens. And it means, a teacher meeting with Barry or with whoever, to give them an opportunity to ask questions and them to answer. I think that should be a full effort to make that happen so that our teachers are with us. I really do. Okay. And we've got 2 weeks to do it. So that's great.
Yeah. And I guess I would say just, we set that week as a target week, and, we understand that the environment's highly fluid.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really glad that we're having this conversation. Jen, go ahead.
Sorry, Debbie.
No,
I think so many people's questions kind of rely on the numbers. Any chance your letter tomorrow will have a survey in it? Are you guys going to be ready?
I think Jory's intending to send the survey out tomorrow.
Okay.
Was that for me, Jen? Yeah, then yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yes. Yeah, I would, I know there have been a lot of comments around our building, and I know I represent the building, so I want to just take a second, if it's all right, to just say a couple of things. I am very proud to represent Middlebrook and everybody that works there, and I would hate to let this meeting go without representing their voice to a certain degree about giving any sense that they are not passionate, caring, loving employees who really want to do the right thing by kids. And so, even the message in Andrew's letter, I think that if we were to ask them, every single staff member would sign on right now if we could get back to some level of normalcy and bring kids back in. And I think what we heard, Kevin and I, in the staff meeting, and then also the hours of conversation we had afterward, and then the one-on-ones that we've had throughout the building. There have just been incredible efforts and energy for passionately wanting to do this right. And frankly, folks are scared and they're feeling very vulnerable. And because there's so much about this disease and the way it transfers and how different elementary kids are from middle school and a little older kids, there are so many dynamics to it that folks can't get their hands on. We're talking about very intelligent people, educated people that are feeling a little lost on what's right and what's going to make them feel safe. But through it all, it's really a very strong effort to make sure that it's done right for the kids' safety and obviously for their safety. And we can throw a blanket over this, and sometimes it ignores the particular circumstance of a given individual who has a compromised immune system themselves, or is living with someone who has a compromised situation, and therefore they're worried about the life and death struggle that is very real to the possibility of bringing that disease into their home. So I don't want to let the meeting go and think that these folks don't want to do the right thing. They absolutely do. And I hope that's coming through in my statement here. And I know Kevin heard it full bore at the meeting yesterday, even so much to the point where he's made this invite to Barry Bogle and Dr. Mackin next week. We're going to have another meeting with the staff next Wednesday to continue the dialogue, and also just make sure people understand that they are being heard, that as professionals, their own social emotional well-being is so very, very important. It's along those lines of you got to put the mask on yourself before you can help others. And we're definitely at that point where we need to make sure that the plans that we're going to put together starting on the 25th are ready and communicated to staff, get their input on it as well. Administrative team at Middlebrook, we started shaping some of that out. And there's a lot of the weeds that we got to get into in terms of making sure every aspect of it is ready, from bathrooms and occupancy levels to hallways and space. And can we possibly come up with a system by which lockers can be used safely, because the space in the room of people that are just about my size in classrooms, they're moving around now to the tune of about 24 or 25, and there's not much room to have backpacks in there as well. So there's a lot of details that we have to go through. And I think that once we get to the point of getting through all those details, some of that concern will be lowered, but that won't change the dynamic for a particular family who's really concerned about their own dynamic. So sorry for my soapbox, but I needed to kind of speak for them.
Well, no, Jory, you're absolutely right, and I understand that clearly. I believe everything that you said, and I said at one of our meetings before that I felt our emphasis, in one of the issues we were discussing, where we didn't address the teachers, and we need to. They are as important to us as our students. I just want to make sure that that we do everything we can to get them on board and get them supportive of this process, because otherwise it's just not going to work well. And I appreciate their concerns. I really do. And we've got a couple of weeks yet before we do this to try and do everything we can to help them. And that's my concern, that we need to do that.
So, Jory, how much time do you need to prepare? I mean, if we were to vote on the 21st, can you do it in a week, or do you need more time than that?
Well, we're not going to sit idle between now and the 21st. We're going to be working to get that ready. You'll certainly know on the 21st if we're truly ready for the 25th. I'm sitting here right now believing that we'll make sure that we are, in terms of all those logistics and plans, et cetera.
Okay. Just curious if we were going to push it back.
Well, I think I do think that, and Kevin said it earlier, that ultimately we're going to lean on the professionals, the medical professionals, to make the call of whether or not we are in a position where it is safe to bring the larger numbers of kids back. And that's going to be the driving force, that we're, even as educators, we're not qualified to make that call as well as the medical professionals are. And where the numbers are, and they're going to decide from that what is and isn't going to work.
Right. It's First of all, I started to say earlier that I'm glad that we're having this conversation and we're putting all the issues and all the concerns and all the different perspectives on the table. And I hope everyone understands how seriously and thoughtfully we're trying to work our way through this. We do have a little bit of a track record this year that has been largely successful. We are trying to always thread the needle. Our goal is as much in-person learning as possible because we know that that is the best way to learn. And we're doing this within an environment where we're putting the health and safety of staff and students as our top priority. And we have consistently gone back to hanging our hats on the health and the science data that tells us about the health and safety. So by putting this plan out, by keeping it fluid and flexible, because I heard Kevin say that the health data has to stay stable or even get better from here, that we have to watch what this new strain does or does not do, that we have to listen to, of course, Barry Bogle and Dr. Mackin, who will be on site between now and our next meeting. So that we're, in some senses, still watching the information and taking it in before, we actually implement on January 25th. So that date could change, and if it needs to change based on health data and health recommendations, it will change. But we have to also stick to our goals of getting as much in-person learning going as possible and keeping health and safety as our top priority. And as I said, I think it's like trying to thread a needle. And I think we have been, by being cautious and thoughtful and methodical and having these open, honest conversations, I think we have done pretty well so far. So I am looking forward to continuing success within this crazy, pressured, surreal environment at times. So I think, to some of the earlier questions about mitigation strategies and transmission in schools, that is data that we did not have at the beginning of the year, and we have more of it now that indicates that mitigation strategies are successful and that transmission rates in schools are low. And that's borne out not only locally, but also in much of the national, international research. So, each day that goes by, we get a little bit more data. So I think that stands us in good stead as well, that schools, by and large, have been successful in terms of keeping transmission rates very low. But we always, keep an eye on our local data, and that's why we have Barry and Chrissy, and they're going to be looking at exactly the conditions on the ground at Middlebrook. And they may or may not, change their viewpoint, based on our data and based on what they see at Middlebrook. But at this point in time, they feel comfortable at least putting that sort of target date and that plan in place. So I think that that's where we are. And I have no doubt that our teachers, have been dedicated and passionate about the kids. And of course, we're all worried about the safety issues, and we're trying to do the balancing act, protecting everyone and providing our kids the best learning environment possible. So I think so far we've done a pretty good job of balancing all that. And I think with all the skills that we have around this table in our staff, that we'll be able to continue to do that. So understanding all that, are there any other comments, concerns, questions, or are we ready to make a motion about this plan that Dr. Smith has proposed?
Kevin, can you just review the dates again?
Sure. So we'd set as a target date for the 6th grade, Monday, January 25th. 7th grade would be the following Thursday, the 28th. and then the 8th grade that Friday, the 29th.
And so this is assuming Wednesdays are still going to be half days remote though.
Correct.
Got it.
And this will change if the COVID numbers change within the town.
Yep, as Debbie just described.
Right, we'll have a chance at our next meeting to confirm or, review the health data, to hear updates as to Dr. Mackin's and Mr. Bogle's feelings and their recommendations.
Okay.
So the door is open, as it always is, to needing to be flexible and adapt. But I do think that we're trying to figure out, is this the right direction to move in at this point in time to set these target dates? And if we are comfortable with what we've heard, I do think that it's time to perhaps hear a motion to that effect and see how we feel as a board.
Debbie, I'll make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. So by that motion, I think what we're doing is endorsing Dr. Smith's target plan as he's described.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. And Ruth seconded. Any discussion before we go on to the vote?
No, we've had enough discussion, I think.
Okay. All right. So again, with all the caveats and all the flexibility that we know this motion implies, all in favor,
Aye.
please signify aye. Any opposition? Okay, the motion carries. So thank you, Kevin and DeJory, and please keep us updated, whether it's, written updates, as between now and our next meeting. And of course, we'll have another full discussion on the 21st to confirm or adapt if we have to. Okay?
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Good luck.
Okay. Oh, wait, and there are other items on the agenda, sorry. Lost a little bit of track here.
Goals.
Okay, we need to go through our talking about next year, 2021 to 22 Wilton Public School goals. We have seen these in our December meeting, and we've had some discussions and questions back and forth for clarification via email. The reason that we are looking at them now is because this is a little bit ahead of our budget proposals that Dr. Smith will be presenting at our, oh my gosh, that's coming up too, at our next meeting. So I do think that it's important as a board that we are clear about what our program goals, our district goals are. So then when we see the budget, we understand the rationale for it. So it's important that we approve or discuss or modify or whatever we want to do with those goals, but that we do set them before we put a budget behind it. So are there questions or comments, or Kevin, do you have updates or any questions?
Yeah, I think, if you just offer a couple comments, and I also have your questions that I'm prepared to respond to if you'd like.
Yeah.
But what I've tried to do here, and as we've done over time, is we try to organize, some of these, goal areas by department. And,
Right.
These are all proposed under the, broader umbrella of continuous improvement. And, so some of them have more direct potential funding implications. Others are more, kind of business as usual, just trying to, advance the ball down the field, so to speak.
Exactly. Okay, I did send a couple of questions. One was about the financial services and the goals there. All of that, is ongoing and makes sense. But I'm just wondering, because we have already had a couple of discussions about how best to budget and account, literally, for the facilities renovation costs, especially when they get into big projects. So I'm just suggesting that we add that somehow as a goal, but if you don't feel that's appropriate, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, this is, this has been a conundrum for us for a long time. And it's, what happens is when we, because of the funding streams available, we find ourselves year in, year out, pitting some programmatic needs against facility needs. So when Ann and I were speaking about that earlier today, what I suggested to her is that, we should actually, try to pull together a higher level meeting with you, with First Selectwoman Vanderslice, with Jeff Rudeshauser from the Board of Finance, maybe with some others who would be able to offer some good insight. And we need to talk about how we manage the capital maintenance of our buildings. And I think, within that conversation, we can propose, some more finite questions about, what exactly qualifies for bonding versus what qualifies for or doesn't qualify for bonding, and how much of that is driven legally versus how much of that is local choice, and then I just think we need to treat it a little differently. And
okay, and my suggestion is not to solve it tonight, but try to at least put it into to add it to as a bullet to our financial goals.
Well, Deborah, this is one of the topics that we had a lengthy discussion.
Yeah, exactly. So if we could add something to the effect of, how to manage the capital needs of our facilities, and just leave it at that.
Okay, I'll do that. So
I would like to make sure that we keep addressing it and we try to come to some sort of plan.
Why don't I'll call it just address capital planning process.
Perfect. That's great. Okay, I appreciate that.
Okay. All right. So I've added it, and I'll update this document as we go here.
Okay.
May I a question? As I went through the goals, Kevin, and you touched on all the major categories. The one thing that struck me as being missing was technology. It isn't anywhere in the budget goals, and it's a significant portion of our expense. And I'm just curious as to, are we not doing anything from a technology standpoint going forward next year? Or are we going to, I just don't, it's not there at all. And I guess
it's, it's not there because I feel like our technology plan has become business as usual. Several years ago, we came forward with a multi-year plan that, as Eric had presented to the board. And so what's, evident, I guess it's, its absence just means it's business as usual. It doesn't mean it's not a goal. But, we continue to budget funding for replacement Chromebooks and replacement smartboards and the like. And, we've come to a very good point in time where we have, almost universally transitioned away from, desktop units to mobile units. We've, achieved our Wi-Fi goals. We've updated wiring and switches and all of that. So now it's, the maintenance rather than the expansion. I think the only other area that we're actually deferring, we had been in the process of creating these larger multimedia presentation spaces. And so we had plans a year ago to increase the number of those spaces across the district. And we're just given kind of all of the other fiscal demands right now. We're just deferring on some of those activities.
All right, so for this coming year, then, from a technology perspective, it is business as usual, just a normal flow, normal routine, nothing, we're not going to see anything extraordinary or any significant requests coming through.
Nothing out of the ordinary.
Okay, good. All right, that was the only question. It struck me as being missing. I just want to make sure that we are,
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Okay.
Okay. And Kevin, I had asked about, in terms of strengthening the curriculum, our new course proposals. Could we put that as a bullet as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, again, just when I was preparing this, kind of the same thing. We have them annually. And so I will add that just, we'll be implementing.
Well, they're specific new ones. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think my other question was around math achievement. There are 3 or 4 things targeted, but nothing at the high school level that was specific. And that's not to make you add one. It's more like as part of our improvement plan, is that on the table for next year or not?
It is. And I would say, math achievement, as we discussed at length earlier today, math achievement across the district is is on the table, and we're taking a very close look at it. And again, we've had, Trudy put forward a multi-year plan that we have been steadily working through. The most recent changes at that high school level really have had to do with some of those level 1 courses. And then we have part of the new course actually pertains to math and how we address some of our students who receive special services in mathematics.
All right, so I'll just assume that it's under the continued implementation of the mathematics program improvement plan. Okay, thanks. And then we're talking about learning recovery, which is a new concept, given our pandemic. And it's only one bullet. So I just want to make sure that the language covers all the possibilities of what you need to do.
Yeah, I think it does. And, to the extent that, this is, as you just noted, emergent. And so, we have, and we continue to grow our diagnostic data. And so, working, with the staff and reviewing that data and customizing responses. The environment next year is going to also, as you heard some commentary earlier today, impact how we do those things. And so, we have not been able to run the kind of small group instruction that we would typically, that is so powerful in providing, intervention and support to kids. And so that's something that we're going to have to continue to pay attention to, but it's going to be emergent and dependent on the environment how we do that. But I would say just understanding more generically as a goal area, we know this is an area we'll be paying attention to. And so I think, it's broad enough that we'll be able to adapt and respond as we learn new information.
Okay, and then my last concern, and I'm sorry to take up all the time at this point, was about, and I think I had Glenn's hat on when I wrote the question in an email, which is in any one year, how much new are we doing? We don't want to bite off more than we can chew. And we have this whole post-pandemic universe to deal with, and we want to do that well. And so I understand we have, sort of strategic initiatives going forward. And I don't want to stop them, but I'm trying to figure out how to balance it so we don't put too much new on the table and try to deal with a post-pandemic year of we're not quite sure. And that I think needs to be our top priority. So it's really sort of a philosophical question. It may translate into money, of course, but given our resources, not only in money but also in time and staff, staff expertise, we don't want to stretch anyone too thin. So that's why I asked the questions about should we be more cautious about continuing with some of our strategic initiatives at the same pace we usually do?
It's a great question, and I think that is one of our habits. It's an exercise that the administrators and I engage in all the time about trying to understand and prioritize. And our attention has been called to many different areas over time that have we wanted to focus on to improve. And I think what I would say in response to that is, there are some elements of our professional development work and our improvement work that have, been in place and aren't pieces that require, lots of staff time or lots of intensity. So for example, the work around developing understanding of universal design. That's been work that's been in place and has been, I think, progressing slowly but surely over time as we tweaked units and revised and embedded those principles in our approaches. Certainly in the work around incorporating and utilizing technology, UDL is very present in that approach, but it's not necessarily time intensive as an exclusive focus. I think, some of the other areas that we need to, continue to interact with our teachers and assess levels of readiness around some of the, the curriculum implementation that we've been moving forward with. So, the other example that comes to mind is the work with Teachers College. So that's been very much in place. for a number of years at the two lower schools. There's a proposal to set aside some funds in professional learning to engage differently some of our Middlebrook staff. So I think, we have a proposal, in the budget to make available that opportunity. But I think, working with Chuck and Jory and Karen Brennicky and the team over at Middlebrook, we have to look at that one. So I think, I guess I am, based on the information I have today, comfortable having it there. But I'm also, as we have been in so many other ways, open to being flexible and modifying as necessary. So we don't, walk down a road that we're not prepared to walk down, or, we bite off more than we can manage.
Okay, I think those were my major questions. And I know the special services narrow the achievement gap, and then specifically the level 1 courses at the high school. Will that be the focus next year? Will it be more specific than that? I couldn't get a good picture of what that meant.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say it's the focus, but it's a focus. And I think that conceptually what we're after here is continuing the work that we've been engaged in around ensuring that all students have access to grade level content and instruction. And so that's been a priority area for us in the last year or so. But I just, as we're thinking about, how all of these, various goal areas are operationalized, we will be, coming back around to our annual process. So we kind of establish these broad, more generic goals, and then departmentally and by building, each of the department heads, our principals, will come forward to the board in the fall with specific action plans where, these will be elucidated. And, within that, there'll be other, more discrete activities, as we've done in the past.
Okay. Okay, and again, I apologize for jumping in and asking all my questions first. Are there other comments, questions from board members? Okay, I guess I took all the air out of that room. All right, so Kevin, are you okay with us to go ahead and vote to approve these?
I am, and with the understanding that, I've captured some modifications based on this conversation. So, you'll be, approving the goals, with the understanding that there is, a couple of changes addressing the capital planning process, as well as a note about the implementation of the new courses at the high school.
Okay, and I think we all understand that in many senses, this is a working document. So is there a motion to approve the 2021 to 22 district goals as presented and discussed?
So moved.
Thanks, Mandy. Is there a second? Thanks, Glenn. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, they're approved. Thank you. Following that are the budget assumptions. So Kevin, do you want to highlight those for us briefly? And
Sure.
Take questions as we go.
Yep. So, again, I think, one of the notes I got from one of you, I think Debbie, it might have even been you, is just, renaming, so that it's not pandemic recovery assumptions, but, budget assumptions. So I've made that edit just to be crystal clear about, what it is we're talking about here. And so I think, the more obvious ones pertain to honoring collective bargaining agreements, complying with state and federal mandates. That's, those are our obligations, and we do that. Some of the others that are, a bit unknown have to do with enrollment. So as we've discussed previously, Ellen was here a month or so ago and presented her projections. Those projections didn't include any students who may be homeschooled or are currently engaged in private schools and may return to us. We have surveyed a number of those families, and we've heard responses. And so we have adjusted, which you will see as part of the budget presentation in 2 weeks, some of those enrollment estimates based on feedback we've gotten. And so, we're anticipating that we'll have more students here in the district participating in our in-school program than are currently captured in Ellen's projections. We're also, just to kind of replay some tape for a second, as we were first setting up these assumptions, one of the major questions was, what's life going to be like? Are we still going to be, kind of in this mode that we're in today, or are we going to be in some kind of recovery mode where things are moving back to kind of, more typical operations? And so the agreed upon assumption was we'll be in the latter, this environment where, we're not rid of COVID by any stretch of the imagination, but we'll be in the process of returning to more normal operations. Sorry, my son is just trying to plug in his Chromebook. Just give me 2 minutes, okay? So in terms of, how that's accounted for in the budget, we can anticipate that, we'll still have an increased amount of custodial supplies. There may still be, mask wearing and those kinds of things. Some other, possibilities that we need to be ready for. Andrea has spoken about the potential for increased special education litigation, increased costs around having to provide compensatory services. All of that is still unknown. And so we need to, recognize that. And so I think it's reasonable to assume that there are potential costs in special services that, may impact our budget and operations. Some other things, currently, facilities wise, we're running all of our air handling units at maximum capacity. And so Mark Esposito, our HVAC specialist in the district, has just expressed some concern that, that's not typically how, they've been run in the past. And the current level of operation may impact their lifespan. And so it's important to just understand that, we may come to a point in time where we have some more extraordinary repair costs or replacement costs. So we need to be mindful of that. And then, as we've kind of already discussed related to our other goals, we're certainly going to be very mindful of attending to learning recovery and making sure that our students are achieving at the levels they should be. And so there'll be programmatic implications, and there may be some budget implications as well. I guess the last one is number 15, I would highlight. And so thinking, really positively, I will be engaging in conversations with administrators as we get deeper into the winter with staff, with parents, about what are the silver linings educationally and instructionally that have emerged through this pandemic. And so one of the clear ones that I see is our ability to effectively use remote learning. And so, thinking back before the pandemic, we understand that our school-based programs didn't meet the needs of all kids. And today, we actually have some kids who are doing really well with remote learning and actually prefer remote learning to in-person instruction. And so as we're thinking about what life is going to be like in the future, I think that's one of our assumptions now. We need to find a way to bake into our operations how we effectively respond to, manage, and provide for those kids who prefer alternative opportunities for instruction. And so that's something the pandemic has revealed, and we've scaled up dramatically in response because we've had to. And so now I think we should assume that there'll be elements here that we're going to choose to keep.
Okay, Kevin, I would highlight number 14 about class sizes because this could have a impact in that, and I understand the rationale, but I think it's important that we highlight it and explain it a little bit about your rationale.
Yeah, thanks. I glossed right over that. So we've added some classroom-based staff at the K-5 level in response to the pandemic. Specifically, we hired a 5th grade teacher as we were gearing up to bring more kids back to Sutter Mill. What I'm proposing is that we hold on to the classroom-based staff that we've hired, at the K-5 level. And the intention there is to keep our class size averages on the lower side of our average range. And so, we're not talking, dramatic reductions where we're going to be down in like the 13, 14, 15 student range. But what I'm looking at, is to the best that we can anticipate class size based on the information we have, is trying to keep them, in that 18, 19 range, 17, 18, 19 range. And I think as we're, looking forward and planning a budget, coming out of a pandemic, we want to give our teachers and our kids as many opportunities to recover learning faster. And so I think the small class sizes as a strategy, smaller class sizes, I should say, will aid that. And so that's a choice that I've made, and you'll see reflected in the budget. And it absolutely has financial implications.
Okay, thank you. Questions, comments from the board?
Yeah, I think the class size move is the appropriate move, because we're going to have additional needs to catch up, and doing it with smaller classes will help that process. So I'm all for that. It makes sense to try and do that. Other than that, I think we're fine.
Okay, thank you. Other comments, questions? All right, we need to approve these tonight. Kevin's well into building the budget. Just needs us to confirm that he's working off the right set of assumptions. So is there a motion to approve the 21-22 budget assumptions?
So moved.
Thanks, Mandy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gretchen. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. And good luck, Kevin, with the budget and your staff.
Oh, we're going to be spending a lot of time together, getting the 21st.
Yeah. This is just, okay. We'll look forward to that.
Is this schedule forthcoming?
You should have it. Lucille provided it the last meeting. We can resend it to you. So we have the 21st, and then the following week we have the workshops.
Oh, I must have. Yes, if she could please.
At the end of the agenda, there's some dates there.
Yeah, we can resend those if you like. It's that Tuesday, January 26th from 1 to 3, Wednesday, January 27th, 1 to 3, and then Thursday, January 28th, 1 to 3 will be the budget workshops.
It's on this agenda, but I can send a separate document as well.
Great, thanks.
Thanks.
Okay. The last, action item is approving policy 6146, graduation requirements. We have seen those before, had some explanation about the updates and the phasing in of different requirements. Are there questions, concerns, comments? Is there a motion to approve policy 6146?
So moved.
Thanks, Mandy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thanks, Gretchen. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. That's approved. Future agenda items, again, Lucille can send us reminders and updates, but there's a series of meetings focused on the budget. Next section, comments from the public. Lucille, are there additional public comments? Lucille, I think you're on mute.
Yes, no, there are no further comments.
Okay, thank you. All right, that concludes the agenda, and therefore.
Sophie, one quick question before we conclude.
Sure.
I promise a quick question. At the beginning, Kevin had mentioned something about meeting with Bob about doing the high school planning. I was just curious if you could just give us 30 seconds or less so you guys are just going to meet about the next steps for the high school.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, going back to broad goals, it's our goal to get more kids back at all of our schools. And so in terms of complexity, the high school has and remains, the most challenging building to bring more kids back into. And so he and his team have been kind of engaged in examining various opportunities and options for some time. And so tomorrow is the first opportunity. He and I are going to have to really kind of debrief, what the opportunities are. And, kind of once I get through that conversation, I'll feel more comfortable coming back to all of you with some recommendations about, when we can, even put it on an agenda to just open the conversation up more publicly.
Perfect.
Okay, thank you. All right, then I think that does conclude the agenda. So therefore, I'm going to adjourn our meeting. So thanks everyone for tonight. And we'll be getting to see each other much more frequently in the fairly near future. So thanks everyone, and thanks to the staff for all your, as usual, thoughtful and careful work on behalf of our kids. So good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody.